might say there's a lot of unhelpful advice out there around productivity and success, like you're going to sleep when you're dead, all that stuff. If anybody watching or listening wants to truly achieve their dreams, what do you think are 3 things they should focus on first?
The first one is you should get clear about what your dreams are, as opposed to just have a hint of them, because soft, intuitive, undisclosed dreams are just there to bother you. But specific dreams can be challenged. Specific dreams give you the chance to say, no, I don't really want that. And then the second thing is to be very clear about the change you seek to make, the change you seek to make in yourself and in others. You are not entitled to change other people. They have to go along with you, which leads to the third one, which is to develop the empathy to realize that other people don't see what you see, don't want what you want, don't need what you need, and that's okay. So if we can bring other people something that helps them achieve their dreams in a way that helps us, it's way more likely that's going to happen than if we just sit in a dark corner whining about the fact that our intuitive dream hasn't come true yet.
The clarity piece, I feel like that's one of my favorite words and my favorite things to discover and to crystallize is that clarity. It's like, what is it that I actually really want?
And what don't you want? So you can't, like, I was a couple of years ago, I was at this ice cream place in Syracuse, New York, and there was 20 people in line, and this woman finally got to the front, and she was paralyzed. She had had half an hour to pick her flavor, but in that moment, she realized she's only going to get 1 serving of ice cream today. She could have a double or even a triple, but only 1 serving, which meant she couldn't have 30 of the flavors. And a lot of people have trouble with, if I want this, it also means I can't have that.
Yes. That's big. Opportunity cost, which we may or may not talk more about. I feel like our world can be really noisy at times, or at least maybe that's the experience. And I've watched myself, like, I'm so happy that I lived before the smartphone. And I'm so happy that I have memories of way back in like the 70s and the 80s and what my experience of living was like compared to now. What are your thoughts, perspectives, and if you have any practices around like morning or evening routines that have helped you do work that matters? I admire you and I love you for so many reasons. And just one of the gajillion is how generous you continue to be with your work in creating things for us to engage with in your books, in your writing. So morning and evening routines are a question that I always get. So I'm passing that along to you. And if there's ever been 1 or 2 that you feel like, you know what, that one really made a difference.
So what is a routine? A routine is a decision not made. Meaning, if you do something every morning, you're not reconsidering it every morning. You made a decision once and you're sticking with it. That's the single best reason for a routine to exist. The problem that people have when they confront their smartphone and social media and things like that is they keep trying to make a new decision. I'm only going to look at this one email. I'm only going to send this one thing. I'm only going to do this one. And then situationally, they have to reevaluate. And so there's decision exhaustion. Yes. And so I decided, for example, 20 years ago, that I would have a blog every day. And that means that tomorrow there's going to be a blog post, not because it's my best blog post, but because it's Thursday. And that ritual then informs a big part of my life. It's a decision to say, there are no circumstances under which a phone is going in the room where I sleep, right? It's a decision to say, I will always go for a walk, even if it's only 1 block, no matter what the weather is. Because if I go 1 block, I might keep going, but if I make the decision inside, I'm making a new decision about walk or no walk. So my particular rituals aren't that important.
Yeah.
What's important is that you have some and that you don't stick with them because you want to stick with them. You stick with them because they're helping you achieve the goals you're seeking.
What's a typical day in your life look like these days, if there is such a thing? So when people ask me that question, I've often said they're so not the same. I'm very much a person who appreciates a lot of variety, and sometimes it's just built in. Like, for instance, today that you and I are shooting together, and I'm like, oh, I need to be on camera, and oh, you kind of back up all the things that happen. But I'm curious if that looks different these days than it did, say, when you first started out, because I'm just interested in the journey of how that shifts.
So, like you, I worked really hard to make it so that days aren't the same.
Yeah.
My first real job in a real office was moving an IBM 360 mainframe from one facility to another in Cincinnati. And it was only 3 days into the summer. I said to myself, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, it's over. I can't do this. Other people can.
Yes.
I can't.
Right.
I guess there was a long phase, when I woke up in the morning saying, how am I going to make enough money that I don't go out of business? How do I make enough money to feed my family? How do I make enough money that I don't have to get a job as a bank teller? So I was a book packager. I invented ideas for books. And everywhere I looked, something could be a book, because I needed to come up with a new book idea every 4 days in order to sell a book every month, so that 10 years later I'd have 120 books. And that was the cycle. There was a hole and I needed to fill it. As organizations I was part of grew, then I would say my life shifted to, what's the incoming? Who needs help? I've got some life jackets. I've got some insight. I'm throwing them out to people who might be drowning, but there's a team here. And if I don't keep up with the incoming, we're going to fall behind. Mm-hmm. And that was thrilling for many years. I had 85 or 90 employees, and 50 of them reported directly to me.
Wow.
And so I was hooked on this magic, and the email was young. So there was, and I could actually keep track and help 50 different people. But as soon as it got to 51, then like sooner or later you have a meltdown, right?
Yeah, totally.
And since then, I think the shift has been that a typical day is, what's interesting? What don't I understand? How could I explain that interesting thing to somebody else in a way that would be useful to them? And a lot of it is spent looking for the white spaces, the gaps between, because it turns out if you let time slow down a little bit, you're not racing toward inbox zero, whatever it is, magic things can occur. And so some of the stuff you're talking about that people like to engage with, that I've created, someone will say, well, how did you come up with the idea of a collectible chocolate bar and design the packaging all yourself? I said, I have no idea. I just know that I was bored enough that I needed to invent a new thing.
Do you ever feel like these days, like, have you simplified enough where, or maybe it's about boundaries, and I'm so curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, do you feel like you have to protect, I'll call it like white space or open space or just spaciousness in your day, that you have to actively kind of put some boundaries around things so that you can be bored and that new things can drop in, appear, emerge?
I think that it's worth putting in a small advertisement now for productive technology. So I can build things using computers and the internet faster than many people. Not everyone, but many people. And I can use tools like Perplexity more eagerly than many people. So what will happen is I can produce a lot of stuff in way less time than a team of 7 people could, because they have to go to all these meetings with each other and compromise on all this stuff. And I'm just touching the tool. And this idea of touching the tool, it's the difference between riding your bike in a city and having someone in a Chevy Suburban pick you up, right? That when you're riding your bike in the city, you're present, you're feeling things, you discover nooks and crannies that other people don't see. Whereas when you get isolated and picked up in this 7-ton truck and you're just sitting there with no sound and no vision, then you end up in a stupor. So I guess what I'm hoping to help people see is you could learn these tools. And they don't have to be the tools I use, but there are tools that have enormous amounts of leverage. And so a simple example in my case, if I write a blog post, things will happen in the world. But that's not how my blog started. It had 100 readers at the beginning. So I would write a blog post and, my brother-in-law would say, oh, that was clever, but that was it. So by building an asset and learning to use it, freedom can ensue. But to answer your question, having a limited attention span and still remembering struggling to make a living combine to make it so that I can get sucked into a project that I might not want to. And I have to be very careful about that. I believe you should quit projects before you launch them, or stick with them until they get to the point where they're supposed to get, but not in between.
Ooh, say more about that. Quit projects before you launch them.
Okay, so if you want to be a productive creator, you have to ship the work. But if you're unwilling to quit, it means that once you ship one piece of work, you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life, right? You're going to be taking ballet lessons when you're 60 years old because you started when you were 3. We need to learn to quit. So when should we quit? Well, in the dip, I point out, if you go to a gym in North America in February, it's very crowded. And in March, it's empty.
Yep.
Because most people who join pay for a year and quit after 7 weeks. But you don't get abs or fitness until you make it till May. So don't even join if you're going to quit in February. There was no point. So what I do regularly is I build out a project, and it could just be on the whiteboard, but it could also be, there's a digital platform and all this other stuff. And then I look at it and I say, if I press this green button, I'm committing to this for a fairly long period of time.
Yes.
But I'm not going to quit after 2 months. I'm either have a vision and I'm going to stick with it, or I'm going to say, that was fun to build, but I'm not going to ship it. And that discipline is really a useful strategy.
How do you decide what to say yes to and no to these days? Because I imagine you get a fair amount of incoming, whether it is speaking engagements, potential collaborations, even your own ideas. Like in my world, what's working for me now is a lot of body truths and trying it on energetically. Like I would try on a sweater if I went to the store and I'm like, looks like it could feel good. And then I see myself in the mirror and it's itchy. And I'm like, oh, absolutely not, and I take that off. And I've been doing the same thing a lot with projects. And the moment I can detect some dread, some heaviness, some contraction, I'm like, oh, hell no. No matter how shiny or alluring or attractive it could be on paper. So I'm curious if you have any frameworks or methodology for how you navigate all the incoming of potentials.
Steve Pressfield's book, The War of Art, is so important.
Yes.
But dread has 2 flavors. And a lot of people who are listening to this are confused about the difference between the 2. There is the dread that I feel after all these years, 1 minute before I get on stage to an audience that I'm unfamiliar with. It doesn't mean I should turn around and not get on stage. There is a dread just before I submit a manuscript for a new book. Doesn't mean I should throw the book in the garbage. Liz Gilbert tells the story of the book after Eat, Pray, Love. She got paid a whole bunch of money. She went away, wrote it for a whole year, brought it to Kinko's, had it copied to send, and then she looked at it and threw it in the trash. And no one has ever read that book. And she tells that as a story of bravery. I tell that as a story of lost opportunity, because I can't imagine that book belonged in the trash, right? So that sort of dread, the dread of resistance, is a symptom you're doing something right. So I look for that feeling in my days. The other sort of dread is the dread that comes with ennui and fatigue and this isn't interesting to me.
Yes.
That's the dread that I am now fortunate enough that I can walk away from. And so many people who don't have the privilege I do still have to go to work.
Yep.
Right? Because they feel dread about their work.
For sure.
To those people, I say, I'm sorry that that's happening. Where can we find in your work the other kind of dread? How can you make it so that you become that indispensable linchpin at work? How can we make it so that your work transforms into one that feels the other kind of dread?
Yes.
Because that makes you feel alive.
Have you ever struggled with overwhelm or feeling stretched too thin? Like I've gone through this several times in my life. I've gone through it several times in my business. And before we kind of turned the cameras on, I was sharing how I'm in another phase of simplify to amplify, which is one of my favorite things that I've done. I can think about it even in terms of my junk drawer at home. And I'm not a person who likes a lot of physical stuff. It's just not my thing. And yet, I can open and I'm like, how did that drawer get so full? Like it is time for a little clean out, and I see that in my plants in my garden. We have a place out in Long Island and I'm like, yes, that tree is lovely and it needs to be pruned. So I'm just curious your experience with those two feelings. I know that in our audience, that feeling of overwhelm or feeling stretched too thin, I see it and hear about it a lot. So I'm curious your advice, your perspective, any stories that you have about that.
Why is it that people can eat lunch every single day and never get burned out on the idea of lunch? Right? Whereas a whole bunch of other things feel like they're cluttering in our days and we say, I'm overwhelmed with this.
Yes.
I'm burning out.
Yes.
Burnout is the feeling of two things at the same time. I want to be here and I don't want to be here. So it's like cleaning out a drawer is not stressful at all if you just throw everything in the trash. But you don't want to throw it all in the trash because, in fact, you want that when you need it.
Yes.
So there's stress. I want it, but I don't want it. And let's go back to the very first thing you said, which is if you're coherent about what your dreams are, it's way less likely you're going to feel burnout. Because if you're in alignment that this thing I'm doing right now, that I'm going through right now, is the obvious direct next step to get to where I'm going, then it's lighter, it's better, right? And I can't believe we've gone this far without mentioning Dorothy, but the Wizard of Oz, which is the metaphor for all things, Dorothy goes through a lot of travails along the way, but she never feels burnout. There's no scene in the movie where she feels completely used up because every one of the steps is a step getting her closer to where she wants to go.
I love that you're not on social media. It just always, it makes me do like inner soul cartwheels. And because we've known each other for so long, it just, I don't know why, it just makes me just want to do jazz hands and all kinds of fun moves. I'm curious of your current perspective on social, just because we know how addicted folks are to their screens and phones. And the follow-up to that is, did you ever entertain using it more frequently, or was it always just like, nope, not for me?
Oh, so many things to say here. The first thing I would say is, please don't mistake the existence of social media and the fact that some people are addicted as an accident. It's on purpose. And the same way John Scully, when he was at Coke, made the size of the 16-ounce Pepsi, made the size of the 16-ounce Pepsi bottle a little bit bigger so that teenagers could drink it all in one swig, called slamming. There wasn't a lot of debate at Pepsi about diabetes. There was debate about, will we sell any more Pepsi? Well, the people who brought you social media, and I was one of them early on, thought about, well, what will people do or not do? And how do we turn up these dials and turn down those dials? So here's this toxic thing that you're using. And some things that are toxic, like hot sauce, are fine in small quantities, but if you drink entire bottles of hot sauce, it's not a good thing.
Yes.
There's no limit on social media, so therefore everything is pushing you in one direction. Do I think humanity is better when it's connected at a certain level? There's no question about it. Do I think giving everyone a microphone, even if they're a troll, a scammer, a spammer, is a good idea? Clearly not. And the algorithms are optimized so that the people who are causing the most division and the most anger get the most attention. So that's the main reason we have so much division and anger in our world, is because those people are being rewarded. So for me personally, I started my blog more than 20 years ago, and at the beginning, comments came on by default. And so there would be comments, and what happened was the first couple weeks, because I only had 100 readers, oh, that's very nice, this person read it. And then someone who doesn't understand what you just wrote says something that's not true. And now you're like, there's somebody out there who seems angry at me and is confused, but they don't understand what I just said. So maybe I'll just respond to them. And then you discover, because you're feeding that it happens more and more. So you say, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start writing my blog so that people won't be confused. So I'll add parentheticals and explanations so that there'll be no chance for them to come to the wrong conclusion. And within a week, I realized I only had two choices: a blog with no comments or no blog. Because I stopped writing like the person I wanted to be. I started writing like a lawyer defensively. And I got all this angry mail from people. How dare you? Blogs have to have comments. Why aren't you? And I was like, you should have your own blog. And then you can write anything you want about my blog on your blog. Put this on your lawn, not on my lawn, right?
Dying, yes.
And so then Twitter showed up. And because I pay attention to tech, I looked at Twitter and I said, I bet I could have a lot of people following me on Twitter. This is going to take off. But I realized if I spent time doing that, I would spend less time blogging.
Yeah.
So I'd become a mediocre blogger and a mediocre Twitter user. And then Amazon reviews started showing up, and I read a couple of my 1-star reviews because I want to be a better writer. And I realized all they say is, this book isn't for me. Everything after that doesn't help because it's not for you.
Right.
So I stopped reading all of my reviews, 5 stars, 1 stars, etc. And every once in a while, I need to go on a piece of social media to promote something for a partner or whatever, like a talk I'm doing. And I'll accidentally see something somebody wrote. And I just, no, thank you. So no, I have no desire to go on to public social media. Private social media is different, but public social media, I have no interest.
Yes. So many humans in my audience. So I have this new experience, which I haven't told you about yet. It's this magical space that I call Dream Club, and it's an app, and it's essentially a private online community and coaching program where
you sent me the link.
Yes, that's right.
Very cool.
So we talk a lot. And we chat and we have conversations. And even with my B schoolers, so many hate social, but they're like, Marie, but how am I going to grow this business? How am I going to grow this brand? So I'm just curious what you would say to folks who absolutely despise, they're just like, no, like, don't make me do it. But they feel like they have to use it in order to be relevant. Like, are there any other alternative suggestions or what would you say to those folks?
All right. So we'll begin with this. What I talk about in the new book is when you pick your customers, you pick your future. This is an intentional act. If you pick people who only do business with folks who are popular on Instagram, then those are the people you're going to get. And that's the life you're going to live. And when they decide to switch to a competitor of yours that's more popular on Instagram, don't be surprised because that's what you signed up for, right? That's the first principle is the people you choose to engage with and respond to are the people that are going to determine who you're engaging and responding with. Seems obvious, but people don't understand this. I was out on Long Island a couple of years ago, really privileged, rich part of Long Island. I went to a fish store and it was off season. And I said to the fishmonger behind the thing, you must have so many masters of the universe coming in here, giving you a hard time. And I said, you're running a great little fish store. What do you do? And he says, the first time they cut the line or give me a hard time or whine, I just say, leave the store. He added a lot of profanity, but yes. Leave the store.
My kind of guy.
It's very clear what happens. The only customers he's left with are people he likes. And he's doing fine. And the people who are inclined to be a jerk don't because they're afraid of getting kicked out of the store. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's the first rule. Pick your customers. The second one is someone is going to win the influencer lottery. I have my hair just right. I have that hat thing on. I did the thing, but it's not going to be you, right? That the Kardashians ruined it for a lot of people because you want to be the next Kardashian. We already have a Kardashian. We don't need that. Plus, if there's 50,000 people all trying to be the next X, one or two will be. One or two will go viral on YouTube or whatever. It's not going to be you. You've signed up for a struggle, feeding the algorithm, working for free for a social media company, and using it as the barometer of your days. Your highs are based on, did you get a bunch of likes? And your low, this isn't, why give up your future this way? And then the last part, as a marketer, I will tell you, social media is a symptom, not a cause of a brand's success. Meaning, when a brand resonates and catches on, other people talk about you. You don't talk about yourself. And so it's true. I'm not on social media, but people talk about my blog all the time because I give them something to talk about. That's my job. But if I'm there talking about it, it's not going to make it any better. It'll make it worse.
I just feel like we went to some marketing, life telling, truth telling, church, and I am here for it. And I say a big amen. Last year, we talked briefly about AI when you were on. And in the beginning of this fabulous new book, which is called This Is Strategy, which y'all got to get your copy. If you don't have your copy, you need to get your copy now. You encouraged readers to challenge Claude with prompts and lists from the book. I'm so curious to hear about your experimentation with AI, how it's evolved. Like, what do you see the potential for entrepreneurs, especially because, again, we do have a lot of folks in our audience who are a one-person show looking to grow to something more than that.
Okay, so I was a computer science major. I studied advanced AI in 1983 with Doug Lennott. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. I worked with Arthur C. Clarke, the 2001 guy. It's here, but you need to understand a couple things. The first thing is it doesn't know anything. It's a trick, and our brain makes us think it's intelligent. It's a trick. I could explain the trick, but it wouldn't help. It's a trick. So don't get confused by the story your brain is telling you. There isn't a little man or a woman inside. It's not filled with wisdom. It's a trick that will help you in certain ways if you give it the right boundaries. Number two, it's the biggest shift in our world since electricity. There's going to, just like when electricity came, some companies said, I don't want anything to do with electricity. They went away. It's here and it's not going anywhere. So there are different platforms, the same way there's, Google and Bing. There's Chat GPT, which is the most famous one. I don't use it that much because it's arrogant and lazy. There's Perplexity, which everyone should use starting right now. It replaces Google. You just ask it a question in English. It does the search for you. It gives you footnotes, so you know it's not making anything up. And you'll see. You can send me a thank you note later. And the other one I use a lot is called Claude. Claude is run by Anthropic. Claude, in my experience, is kind and wiser and not lazy. And some of the things you can do with Claude, you can say, here is my 5-page strategy plan. I wrote it as a Word file, and you upload it. And you say, Claude, please ask 10 hard questions about this. What did I miss? What's a contradiction? And it will. And it won't be perfect, but it will surprise you. You can say to it, I got this memo from this person and this memo from this person. Please write something that's a synthesis of both of them. And it will surprise you. What I used it for, in my books are always written by me, just me, and my blog as well. But I would come up with lists for the books, like 4 things we need to worry about, system traps. And I would say, Claude, here are my 4 system traps. Can you name 5 more? And I would go, and at least 3 of the 5 were brilliant things I hadn't thought of. It is really good at completing lists like that.
Yes.
So if you are a solopreneur, if you're somebody who has a small team, either you're going to work for AI the same way you find yourself working for social media, or AI is going to work for you. If AI is going to work for you, you better hire it, understand how to feed it, and start putting it to work. That doesn't mean you have it do mediocre writing and try to sell it as non-mediocre writing, because there's no market for mediocre writing anymore. What it means is you find tasks that need to be done frequently and quickly that it will do for you, that you can then package and sell to people who need it from you. And, what I expect to see soon, for example, is you could go to a company with 100 employees and say, give me access to your email and the spreadsheet of every one of your employees and how much you pay them. And I will confidentially generate for you a report of who your most valuable employees are and who's getting overpaid. That's worth $100,000 to that company.
Yeah.
And once you've trained an AI to do that, you can do it in 5 minutes, right? And so what we've done is we've given super powerful tools, the equivalent of a giant factory, to any individual who wants to pay $20.
Let's talk This Is Strategy. What is your intention for this book and the impact that you hope it's going to have?
often when I'm writing, I think of you and your followers, your readers, the members of the communities, because here are people who have desire, who are enrolled in the journey. They might not have a sophisticated business education. They might not have a sophisticated technology education, but they're 1 inch away from finding something of real value. And if you ask these folks, what's your strategy? Or in my world, if I ask heads of Fortune 100 companies, what's your strategy? The answer is either a blank stare or a list of projects or a list of goals. None of these things are strategies. A strategy is simple to describe and hard to stick with. A strategy is our way of having a philosophy of becoming. How do we want to engage with the world as it is in a way where we have enough fuel and resources to make a change happen? If you don't have a strategy, you're probably working for someone who does. And so here's a big company example. So I worked briefly at Yahoo after they bought my company. Yahoo's strategy was very simple. Their strategy in 1997 or 98 was, we want to build a place on the web where people come and stay. So you'll come to Yahoo, but then you'll go to Yahoo Kids, and you'll go to Yahoo Mail, and you'll go to Yahoo Gardening or Yahoo this or Yahoo Finance or whatever. Because if we can get 100 clicks every time someone visits, we're going to sell ads. And this company called Google came along. Yahoo had a piece of equity in Google, and they could have bought them for $10 million. And they didn't. And instead, they spent the $10 million improving Yahoo Kids. What was Google's strategy at the time? Google's strategy was, we want to build a place on the internet where people come and leave. That everything they did was to make it so that with as few seconds and clicks as possible, you would end up on some other website. So Yahoo was the old web, which was, it's a little clinky, crinkly, and doesn't work very well. And Google was the open web, which is, you don't want to be on Google, you want to be over there. So we'll take you there. Those are simple strategies, hard to stick with, but clear. So if you say, I want to be an influencer and I want to have 10 million people following me and I'm going to get money for shilling this or that, now I can ask you some questions about how are the systems of the world going to help you do that, or how are you going to be fighting against them? Because if that was your strategy 8 years ago, you were in the right place at the right time. Now, maybe not so much. So we need to be able to out loud describe to people, how are we going to work with systems? Where's our empathy for our customers and our partners? How do we work with time so this will be better in a month than it is now? And what game are we playing? And I'm trying to help a conversation happen.
How does a strategy differ, if you can give simple examples, from tactics or tasks?
So tactics and tasks, they can be secret, they can be short term, and if they don't work, you can come up with a different tactic or task. If a locksmith comes to your house to open a stuck door and the first key doesn't work, they don't say, I'm a failure. They just take the second key and they work through all the keys until something opens the door. Those are tactics, right?
Yep.
A strategy is more overreaching than that. It's something that's our philosophy. It's our mantra. We're not going to change it very often. And your strategy can be super simple. You need a plumber, I'm a plumber. That can be a strategy. As long as there aren't too many plumbers, you'll do fine.
Yeah. So there's, in your book, some of the entries are numbered. 182 is about pricing. So 2 things there. I'm going to read you some of your words. Generous work. The slogan can be, you'll pay a lot, but you'll get more than you paid for. And the tagline is, I see you and I care. Can you elaborate on the concept of generous work a little bit?
Sure. So let's first talk about the pricing part of it. There are only 2 strategies for pricing. One is, I'm cheaper than them, right? We make what they make, but I'm cheaper. And a lot of freelancers are in that game. Upwork, I mean, that's all it is. The alternative is you'll pay a lot, but you get more than you pay for. You have to earn that. How do you earn that? You don't earn it by giving people more candy in the bag, because the candy costs you as much as your competitor's candy costs you. That sort of generosity is foolish because it doesn't scale, it doesn't work. We're not talking about the generosity of giving stuff away. We're talking about the generosity of emotional labor. Emotional labor was first coined in the early 60s by Ariel Hochschild, and it was about how airlines were using misogyny to force women to act a certain way as flight attendants. And she meant it, and I agree with her, as a warning sign. But since then, it's a privilege to be able to do emotional labor because it's way better than physical labor. It is the emotional labor of showing up when you don't feel like, leaning into a problem that scares you, looking somebody in the eye, treating them with dignity. None of these things are in someone's job description, but they're what you do if you're excellent at your job. And so generosity sits right next to emotional labor, which is, I'm going to take the extra time and energy to do this with and for you in a way that will matter.
I wrote down something else. Again, your words. Successful strategies seek to find customers eager to pay money to solve their problems. If you want to find a lousy customer, find someone who has a scarcity mindset or is more comfortable with their problem than they are in spending to make it go away. Again, Seth Godin, you mic drop moment all over the place. One of the things we talk about so often, do it in Dream Club, do it in B School, is this notion of an ideal customer or the folks that you're choosing. And I always go back, I'm like, guys, please underline ideal. And part of that is they are willing and wanting to pay to solve this problem. Is there anything else that you want to say on that? Because I think it's so big.
So if you're a freelancer, and I'm a freelancer, there's no disrespect in being a freelancer. You're selling your presence and your time. You don't make money when you sleep. And the only way to move up as a freelancer is to get better clients. You can't work more hours. So, and you can't hire junior versions of you and pretend you're an entrepreneur. That doesn't work either. You can get better clients. What makes someone a better client? They pay more, they demand more, they have good taste, and they tell the others. If you have people like that, of course you're on your way up. If on the other hand, you got people there who are, using a stopwatch and comparing you and switching all the time, well, you picked your customers. That's your future.
Oof. Let's talk about 247, which is getting the word out. It's probably the phrase that anyone who talks about marketing or who has conversations with it, with people that they love, that is the 4-word phrase we all say all the time. And you write, when someone shares their marketing frustrations with me, the conversation almost always begins the same way. How do I get the word out? What's your response to that? And by the way, in the book, you have several responses, but I'm curious to hear it.
So do you remember when you started your journey? Was it where was the writing or the speaking?
What year?
No, what was it? What was its form?
It was, so I had a newsletter that I would publish every week called Magical Moments.
Perfect. That's the one I want to talk about. First issue of Magical Moments. How many people got it?
Oh gosh, maybe 1 or 2.
Exactly.
My parents.
Yeah. First week of my blog, 6 people. So neither one of us spent a lot of time getting the word out.
No.
What happened was someone who got it shared it with someone else, who shared it with someone else. Not in some short-term viral thing, but incrementally over time.
Yes.
People who say, I'm willing to trade trust and respect to get the word out. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to stand naked on the street corner holding a sign. That never works. It just does not work. You get the word out by telling 10 people. If they tell the others, you're onto something. And if they don't, make better work. It's that simple. And this is part of the foolishness of social media, is it looks like you can hustle your way to get the word out. But I keep bumping into those people every couple of years and then they go away.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't persist.
Yes. So looking back on your career, is there any surprising lesson that you've learned about strategy that you wish you learned sooner?
Well, as you and I have talked about, I've failed more than most people, and I don't want to trade in any of the failures because they're why I'm here and who I am. But what I have discovered is that the people you think have it completely figured out don't. And it is tempting to not talk about our strategy because we think those people have a brilliant strategy and will look stupid. But I've been in those rooms at presidential campaigns, super famous companies. The number of people who actually have a thoughtful strategy is very low. And everyone's just doing their job and being instinctive or intuitive. But if you have an intuitive strategy, you're hiding from something because you got to say it out loud if you want it to get better.
You want to know the number one reason people don't get what they want in life? Because they don't really know what they want, which is why I created the free Dream Clarity Formula. It's going to help you get clear, define your number one goal, and achieve it fast. To get it, simply click on the link below this video or scan the on-screen QR code. Hurry and grab it now, because the clearer you get, the faster your dreams are going to come to life. I know we talked about publishing already, but I do want to circle back with this because I feel like it's up for myself and for many people that I've had conversations with. So 2 decades now you've had the blog?
Yeah.
Publishing daily. And I love that you were like, hey, this is a decision and I made it once and I don't have to make it again. I'm curious though, because we're all human, if you've ever had moments or times where any part of you is like, even if it was a flittering thought, like, I need a break, or, I need to take a minute. Or are you like, nope, the way that your DNA is, I've made a decision, this is it. And perhaps you would change at some point in the future or perhaps not. But I'm curious if there's anything that you've seen that maintains enthusiasm or consistency, or you're like, enthusiasm piece, sometimes I don't feel like it and I just show up.
All right. So we're back to our favorite conversation about authenticity.
Yes.
I think authenticity is for friends and consistency is for professionals. And when I am doing my work, I am consistent.
Yes.
But I'm not authentic. If I'm fighting off of cold or whatever, I'm not going to whine about it.
Right.
Because I'm consistent.
Yes.
So what you present to your audience is a choice. After 4 years of the blog, I realized that I had a streak going.
Yeah.
And I needed to internalize that and see myself as a daily blogger. But it also meant it would be foolish to lose the streak because there was a power blackout in Westchester County. So there's a cue of my blog. I will die and the blog will keep going. So I'm allowed to take it. I've taken a month off and no one knows because I'm consistent in public. And so if you are signing up for your brand to be you personally bleeding in public on a regular basis, it's going to exhaust you. You can't consistently do that. That's what Amy Winehouse did. It doesn't work. You have to build in buffer and slack so that you can be authentic to yourself and your family and your friends without violating what your brand stands for.
Yes.
And the brands that persist, that's what they do.
I think one of my favorite things that we did and that we're actually working to get back to is I love batching, where it's like, wow, we've got X amount of Marie TVs in the can, and it provides a lot of freedom and flexibility. So thank you for that. Let's talk about teams and support, which I think is another area where it can be really tricky and hard. How do you approach hiring people for projects? And are there any lessons that you've learned that you're like, my goodness, I'd love to pass this along?
I made the decision a bunch of years ago. And it's so much easier now to do projects than it used to be. The number of people who are standing by ready to work with you for a week or a month compared to what it used to be.
Yes.
It's incredible. I don't hire anyone unless I've worked with them before, which seems like a catch-22. What that means is I have a project. I will pay you to work on the project. And if you do great, we'll work again. If you don't, that's cool. But if I'm going to hire a full-time employee, I'm not going to do it based on an interview and a resume. We don't need to do that anymore. I'll pay you, even if the project is only 1 day long, so we can find out the one thing we need to know. Is working together worthwhile?
Yes.
Right? And it's tempting to say, no, I need to commit to somebody and the whole thing. And I've done that many times, hundreds and hundreds of times. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's bad for them and for you.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is whatever tasks you can outsource, meaning your clients can't tell, you should outsource. Because you can then focus on the part your clients can tell.
Yes.
And it's not the case if it's your hobby and your craft and you like refinishing the wood, then please go ahead. Yeah, not everything is work.
Yep.
But when you have competitors who are going to be outsourcing the thing that the client can't tell, they're going to be able to deliver more value than you can. So, I've decided not to outsource my writing, mostly because my hobby, my pride is hooked up in saying I wrote all of those words.
Yes.
Right. I once interviewed a really well-known entrepreneur, and I was nervous because she had succeeded at great heights in an area I didn't understand. So I read both of her autobiographies, and we're sitting there in the interview, and I ask her a couple questions, and it becomes clear. Not only hadn't she written her autobiography, she hadn't read it. That's not okay with me.
Yes.
Right? But James Patterson creates all these books. James not writing every single word. And he's very upfront about that.
Yeah.
Whereas Isaac Asimov wrote all 400 of his books, and he was very proud of that.
Yep.
So you got to pick. But if you have a bench of 10 or 15 people you can count on, the idea that the elves are going to come in while you're asleep and tomorrow it's going to be what you were hoping for, particularly if you can use AI in that way, that's our future.
Yep. So in your book, and I love this because I feel like it's, of course, a theme in your work, it's about creating change.
Mm-hmm.
So in this world, especially for people who are just getting started, and I also love that you emphasize don't run out of time, don't run out of money. How can folks start to identify the opportunities to create really meaningful change and kind of balance innovation and risk-taking with their need for stability?
Yay. Another great question. I knew I could count on you. So next summer, if you go up to Toronto and then drive 3 hours north to Algonquin Park, you can rent a canoe at the Portage store and go on a canoe trip. I strongly recommend you do. And if you're on a canoe trip, you might want to start a campfire. There's kindling, which are the little tiny bits. Pine needles don't work. And then there are logs. The first rule is don't try to light a log that's too big for the kindling you have. If you just got a few little sticks, you need to light a little tiny log. And then later, you can put a bigger log in and a bigger log, and then you can burn down the whole forest. But if you take your little tiny sticks and put them under a giant piece of birch, nothing's going to happen. So we have been seduced by media into saying, if you're not going to build something the size of Spanx, you're a pretender. Right? This is crazy talk. Can you change one person's life? Can you get one customer to pay you $50? Can you cater one party and have that person tell 3 friends? Because if you can do it once, now you have a slightly bigger fire, and you can do it again, and you can do it again. Time is the critical element of strategy. But too often, I remember at my very first job, this guy comes in. I don't know how he got in to see me. I was only 24, but it's still, he walks in and says, I got this great idea. And I have this budget, and we're going to run one ad on the Cosby Show. And that one ad is going to make this the most popular electronic device in the world. And he said, we're going to be like a hot knife through butter, like a thresher through a wheat field. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I was like, have you sold any of them yet? What would happen if you took a tiny booth at one tiny little store? Could you sell 10? Because I promise you, spending every penny you have on one TV commercial is not the way to be a thresher in a wheat field.
If someone feels like, okay, I like this idea of strategy, I feel stuck, or maybe what I've been doing in my current business model, like they've outgrown it, or the market has evolved, or situations have changed. Besides reading This Is Strategy, which they should do, any steps that you would recommend to help them start to think freshly about it and keep it simple?
Well, so like you, it's fine with me if people don't buy my book.
Right.
But I need people to talk about it.
Yes.
That's why I wrote it. So there are no page numbers in the book. There's just article numbers. Why did I do that? Because half the people will read it in digital form or audiobook, and there are no page numbers. So I want you to be able to say, let's talk about 147.
Yes.
So my long answer to your short question is find 3 friends and just meet. I bet 4 times is enough. And each one of you show up and tell them what your strategy is, and listen carefully to what people are telling you in response. Not the lack of empathy of them saying, well, I wouldn't buy that. I don't care if you would buy it. That's not what we're here to talk about. I am articulating that there are people in this neighborhood of this background with these resources who have this problem. And that if I show up, these people, but right? And you can find colleagues who can give you feedback on your strategy that they could never give themselves. And you can repay the favor. So I'm not going to sit here and say, here are the 6 things you should do.
Right.
There's only one thing. Find some people and say your strategy out loud.
As you witness, and we all witness, the future of business and marketing and culture evolving, do you think there are any skills or mindsets that'll be crucial to develop in the coming years?
Well, we talked about some of them. I think enrollment is the key. You could get a job out of college, and the trade is, I'll do what you say if you give me the money. And you don't have to be emotionally enrolled in any way. More and more of those jobs suck, and more of those jobs are being replaced by computers.
Yes.
So what's left? It's the people who want to go on a journey, the people who want to get from here to there. That's a choice. And I think this is at the heart of your work and so much of what I've learned from you. Everything is figureoutable requires that you want to figure it out. Right? And if you don't care enough to figure it out, then it's not figureoutable.
It's so not.
And so here's every piece of knowledge humanity has ever created, all at your fingertips. Here is 7 billion people who are a click away. Here is manufacturing facilities around the world that are eager to work with you. I mean, all of these things that did not exist when I started my career. You don't have to be a soloist. You don't even have to work for yourself. But you can show up enrolled in the journey of making a change, because that's so much better than whining.
Yes. This is a question that I'm so curious about. Do you have a secret dream or aspiration that you've always wanted to explore or pursue?
I've actually think about this kind of question a lot.
Yeah.
The mythology of follow your passion and the work will come is another one of these traps.
Yes.
I don't think Vincent van Gogh, if he was born today, would have dreamed of being an oil painter. Almost no one dreams of being an impressionist oil painter today. And I think if Steve Jobs had lived 100 years before, he would not have dreamed of digital interaction, right? Because no one knew what that was. We invent our dreams based on what we think is possible or what we think is impossible, because it feels safer to dream for something impossible. So I guess what happened as I grew up is I decided to dream for things that were possible. And they keep happening. And it's magic. I'm so lucky, so privileged, and I don't take that for granted for a second. But I don't find any fuel in dreaming for things that are impossible. So, except for time travel and being on the Starship Enterprise. But other than those, most of the time it's just, that's achievable. Do I care enough to achieve it? If I don't care enough, it's not a dream. If I do, let's go.
Yes. Is there any piece of advice that you would love folks watching and listening right now to remember and act on after listening to this conversation?
You're almost certainly better than you think you are. But at the same time, you're not entitled to perfect. So somewhere in between those two things, there's a chance for better. That's something you could start working on right now.
Seth, I adore you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for consistently creating such gorgeous work that makes me personally think and feel and question and want to be better. And thanks for making the time to be here today.
You're the best. Thank you.
Hey, if you loved this video, you need to watch this one next. Trust me on that.